I believe that for all leaders, communication is very important. How you communicate, because that's where relationships are built. And at the present moment, I think the most difficult and the most challenging job is to communicate and how to calibrate communication. What is happening is that when we communicate, we either tend to overreach or overstress certain points, or we understress certain points. And in a large country like India, everything that you communicate is interpreted differently because of the social and psychological and sociological background. So with these words, I would like to first start off with what is this world we are in. And I'm sure many of you have heard about the VUCA world. We entered a very disruptive VUCA world when IT began to disrupt our world. And in the last 10 years or more of the decade of the last century, we were in what's called a VUCA world. A VUCA world is where volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity rules over us. And what has complicated is that COVID, when it came, definitely it was truly volatile. The change was too sudden and uncontrollable. It brought with it a lot of uncertainty. Nobody had seen, there was no precedent to go back to. It already entered a very complex world, and it added to the ambiguity. And on top of it, what COVID has done is broken trust. There's a huge trust deficit which has happened because of COVID. Trust in every sphere. Trust because distrust because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. There's fear all over. We don't know whether we'll be alive tomorrow, whether COVID is going to seize us tomorrow. There is uncertainty because apart from our own health issues, there is also this entire uncertainty in terms of finance, in terms of our jobs, in terms of our family. And there is also distrust which has developed because of whatever conditions COVID has brought with it. So VUCA has become even more complicated with what you would call the FUD world, which COVID has introduced. The pandemic has added doubt and fear at all levels. And there is great volatility in relationship. We have always heard that man is a social animal. Man likes to build networks. Any MBA student who goes to study says it's not all about knowledge from books. It's all about how you can interpret, how you can network, how you can build personal relationships. So it became, we were in a world where relationships were important, when networks were important, starting from the family to our little groups and our society. It was relationships and network which drove this world. So there were networks at the individual level, at the family level. There were networks at the institutional level. And with globalization, there was networking between nations. Whenever any matter came up, anywhere, you tried to build consensus. You tried to argue for your point of view, to get more support. So the whole world was moving on networking. So what COVID has done is left whole of humanity in a crisis and without a solution in sight. So the global recession seems inevitable, coupled with huge job losses. Earlier, if we faced a problem in one country, we always hoped that we could go somewhere, look for a job somewhere. If we faced a problem in our own state, we said, okay, we could go move somewhere, look for a job somewhere. Maybe in Bangalore I could find a job, or maybe somewhere else I can find a job. But today, the entire world is in crisis, and the entire world is in global recession. So there is no way to hide anywhere or seek relief anywhere. And what began as a health crisis, a global health crisis, definitely with economic costs. Some people estimate that the health costs would be something like 4% of GDP in India alone, which is $120 billion. And God help if some vaccine is brought in and then we have to do compulsory vaccination for our kind of population, it's going to cost a lot of money. So the pandemic has been a huge disruptor with definite changes in the power brokers. Definitely the global world order has changed. And in the process, COVID has also created social concerns, an epidemic of despair rising out of an uncertain future. But one thing I want, and I keep repeatedly saying to all my friends and colleagues, is that COVID has not broken the system. COVID somewhere has exposed the chinks in the system, the gaps in the system. And what we are faced with is really the gaps are showing, the socio-economic gaps, the public health infrastructure gaps. So all the gaps are exposed. And how do we tackle these gaps? How do our leaders come to grips with these gaps? Are they willing to learn is the important question. Communicating during a pandemic. I believe that in the heart of all this, in the heart of all this COVID crisis, communication is very, very important. And what COVID has thrown up is a digital authoritarianism. It has led to complete centralization, a complete one-way communication, and the state is back in full force. Countries of Asia like China, South Korea, and Vietnam have greater agility in tackling the pandemic. China, of course, used the authoritarian force, creating fear among the people to fall in line. In South Korea, too, the surveillance was very, very severe, and so also in Vietnam. There have been other models like Sweden where democratic values were respected, where communication was respected, but there was self-discipline among the people, so there was no need. But definitely the pandemic has brought digital authoritarianism into play. And what we see in Kerala is that they developed a very effective communication strategy to deal with the crisis. If we need to control the crisis, if we need to handle the crisis, I believe that communicating with the people is a very important quality that leaders have to have. And if we look closely at the Kerala model, we find that the communication plays a very important role. They are open, they are transparent, and the community is involved in every step of the way. And building this communication has not happened after COVID. It has happened over a period of time. It has happened over many years. That if people have to trust the government, people have to have trust in what the government is saying, then we need to communicate in an open and transparent manner and listen to people and carry them along if we have to use them in a crisis. So how do we turn this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world around? We need to counter it with visionary leadership. And when I talk about visionary leadership, it's not only in government. I'm sure Mahatma Gandhi gave that visionary leadership to our country. Rabindranath Tagore gave that heaven of freedom into which my country will awake. He'd had a dream, okay? But every leader who has to lead with sympathy has to have a very clear vision. Out of this total volatility, out of this confusion, there has to be somebody who knows what is the ultimate objective or the vision. This is not only at the level of the government, it is also in the level of organizations. The other day, I was taking part in a discussion on businesses, on industrial establishments in our country. What is this world into which we will reopen post-lockdown? It will be a world where there will be total distrust between employers and employees, because a lot of them have been sacked. They have been given the red slip. I know in many companies, there has been no transparent communication. They have been given the pink slip saying that they did not perform. In the last 2 months, the employees had no chance to perform. They were asked to work from home and they did whatever they could. They were never trained to work from home. And they were told that you are being sacked because of your performance. And when people protested, and this we are reading also every day, when people protested, they started saying that it is because you resign if you wish to, without anything. So you resign. And the legitimate thing is they want to sack you, but they don't even honestly explain the situation to you. Yesterday, I was very happy to read that in the case of Oyo, he has said that we have tried not to sack employees, but we have to hear the other story. He said we have taken the cut ourselves. But so the post-COVID world, the post-lockdown world is going to be a world of distrust, a world where employer relationships are going to be totally based on fear and uncertainty. So also the public and the government, between the public and the government, because we do not know what the government is going to do. Many of us don't know what's going to happen with lockdown 5, because there is no consultation involved and there is no transparency or communication involved. We are just told that, well, we are going to shut down everything, and for the next 2 weeks, nothing is going to move. But what is the objective of the shutdown? Why was the shutdown done, and what was the objective? Have the objectives been achieved? We should be honest enough to admit that, well, as human beings, we are facing an unprecedented crisis, and therefore we should be honest enough to admit that we have gone wrong. We have estimated wrong. It is quite normal to accept it, and then take measures, consulting people to move forward. So to turn around a VUCA world, we need vision. We need people with courage, with vision and values. So when I go back to a company, maybe the mission of the company was to create, let's say, world-class products. But in the changed circumstances, if I have to change the vision, not only to create world-class products, but create world-class products without affecting the morale of my employees. I have cooperation of my employees, and I cannot. So it has to be a agreed upon vision. It cannot be a vision that I set for myself as a CEO and say, my aim is to make as much of profits as I can and get my employees. So it has to be a vision which motivates, which gives back to society. And a leader of stature has to understand the ethos and others in the competitive world. You are not operating in isolation. Okay, it is not alone that you are operating in this world. There are others. So one has to have the understanding and the knowledge to anticipate threats. What COVID has done is also created a whole complex situation. And we need a lot of courage and clarity. Look at the communication which is being done by the administration and the government in the different states. The press releases or the press conferences which are being addressed are so unclear, so unclear. We need people to write in simple terms and also work out the consequences of my decision. What we are not looking at is how will my decision affect not just one group, but a heterogeneous group. When we decided to lock down completely for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or we decided to extend the lockdown further, we knew, or if we did not know, even within the very first 2 weeks, we knew that that people are going to suffer when they don't have jobs. There were domestic servants who were dependent on working in the families, and they were thrown out of jobs. So what is it? Where is the safety net that one needed to create? And a visionary leader and a sympathetic administration. And honestly, having worked in government, um, uh, we were taught all the time that, of course, still in some states, I must admit that power works and money works. But in most of the states, it was always a sympathetic administration, which tried to help people who were in need, poor people, people who how to reach better education to the poor. So we were in a world of a sympathetic administration. So when we imposed the lockdown, the administration would definitely know that there are many people who are going to suffer. And as the time progressed, it became very clear that many people were without jobs, and this fiat of the government, or the order of the government, that companies should continue to pay even if people were not working, is not going to work, because it is against the complete ethos and the lessons. One has to work in order to earn money, and when the company itself is not earning money, the company is not going to pay its employees. It was just going to happen. But as the time went, because, and I always keep saying, we cannot have a king who sits in his castle. We've read in our younger age about kings who went around among the people to understand how the people are thinking and feeling. So we cannot have a king who's sitting in a castle, or an administration who's cut off from the people that they govern, not knowing how their decisions are going to affect the governed, how different kinds of population. We can't just look at one category of people, and that has been the mistake. And for a visionary leader, we need to look at the last person in the line, and that last person, his suffering and what he has to say has to be heard. And this is where I believe that media has a role definitely to play, and and we by shutting the mouth of media, by calling them by calling what was said yesterday, that they are vultures and we are prophets of doom, waiting to see the worst happen. That is not the objective. The objective is to bring, how will the people in power, the people in administration really know that somewhere along the line some people are suffering? Or how will the public in general know that there are people dying of hunger, that there is a woman on the railway station who is dead and with a young child with nothing to eat, and she died of hunger? How will they know? So it is the duty of media to highlight what is wrong. And like we saw in the film The Post, I don't know how many of you seen the film The Post, media is for the governed, not for the governors. Media is supposed to expose the chinks in the armor, to see what is wrong and bring to the fore what is wrong. So to really stifle or put out media or to remove media is not what a good leader will do. A good leader will use media to get feedback, because feedback is very important, and listening is, an empathetic leader is always a great leader. A person who listens and is able to empathy. It's not sympathy. It's not looking down from a higher position with sympathy at a lower person, but empathizing with a person, suffering along with a person, understanding what his pain and suffering are, and try to remedy his person. He is a great leader. When communal riots happened, Mahatma Gandhi stopped his yatra. He stopped. He said, I will not eat. This communal violence has to stop, because he was aware of what was happening on the ground. He cannot continue his vision without paying any attention to what is happening around him. And that is why media and communication is very important. And a great leader in a ambiguous world, in a volatile world, needs to be agile and adaptable. And in many situations, we have seen that a government which adapts, which is flexible, which doesn't resist, is a government which will succeed. Leaders will succeed if they are more flexible and adaptable and willing to take into account the concerns and at least partially address. It's not always possible to address all the concerns of all the people all the time, but at least give a sympathetic ear, listen to their problems and try to address some of the problems. And that, I think, is what we have been taught in administration. Gone were the revenue roles of earning. We basically, the British had used the administration as land revenue collectors, but as we came in post independence, our duty was to basically help the poor, lift the poor, which is why we've had these large anti-poverty programs, malnutrition programs against malnutrition, programs for promoting girl child education, because we were seen as purveyors of welfare schemes. We were seen as implementers of welfare schemes. And what we have forgotten in this whole COVID situation is that instead of being those looking at the welfare, looking at seeing that trains which run with food available, because these are people who are desperate to get back, and it's only natural for people who are starving, they would rather go back. Not that their life is going to be better when they go back to their villages, but it is only natural that you want to be with whom you are. But if you are not willing to listen, or you want, like some of the statements are completely shocking to me, like the statement which was made that no migrant, that this was made before the Honorable Supreme Court, that there is no migrant labor who starved during lockdown, which is a complete negation. So is all that media is putting out, you are saying is fake, which is not correct. So a sympathetic leader will not block. He would try to internalize, accept. We need to accept mistakes. We are human. We are dealing with a crisis which is unprecedented. And therefore, we need to accept our mistake and correct ourselves. And that, I think, is what is going to succeed in the post-COVID world. Because in the post-COVID world, we need CEOs, we need people at the helm, people who are in decision making, who are more empathetic, who can listen, who can build consensus rather than confront and take people along. And that, I think, is where we need to build great leaders. And to build empathetic leaders, we need emotional intelligence. Ultimately, we need to know who I am, what I'm capable of. And if I am low on my emotional intelligence, I need to have in my company, in my administration, in my government, some people who have a higher emotional quotient, people who can who are empathize, people who can build teams, people who are more not confrontationalists, who are not given to anger, who are not given. So if I am a person who is impatient, who is very hasty in decision making, I need to have a team who kinds of balance and equilibrates me in my organization, in my society, in administration, with a more empathetic view. So what we need to do is have transparency in communications. We need a person with shared goals who encourages two-way communication, not a one-way communication. And the effort should be to reduce fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and rebuild trust and empathetic leadership. So with this, I will end here. I will come back when the questions are asked so that I could touch on points I had left out.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you so much.